That's cool. If each one of you could, okay, Marcy's always managing me. So if each one of you could just kind of tell the audience who you are and maybe, why you're here today.
Hello, everyone. Thank y'all for being here. My name is Marcy Simmons. I'm a system-impacted woman. I spent over a decade in a Texas prison, and I'm here to see the film, to answer any questions, and maybe give a little insight of how things operate in a women's prison in Texas. And I brought my lovely mother.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shawnee Gray. I'm Marcy's mother. My daughter, this is hard. She was incarcerated for almost 11 years. But she's home, and so I may be giving a different perspective than some of these ladies, but I'm very proud of my daughter. I'm proud to be here today. Thank you.
Well, we're grateful for her. My name is Maggie. I am a policy analyst and community outreach coordinator for Texas Center for Justice and Equity. I also run the Statewide Leadership Council, which is a group of formerly incarcerated advocates that work on legislation. And I also spent 20 years in and out of the Texas carceral system. I've been in several county jails across Texas and did some time inside TCJ, so I am here to bring my experience, strength, and hope.
My name is Cynthia Simons. I am the Women's Justice Director at the Texas Center for Justice and Equity and the Program Manager for Via Hope. And I am here to bring the viewpoint of the intersectionality of the family unit, the Department of Family and Protective Services, and the carceral system. They all work together, and they all work together against families. And if we're going to truly get safer and healthier communities, we have to look at what's happening to our family unit with 81% of women incarcerated being mothers.
Thank y'all. And I also too am a system impacted woman. I started my fortunate journey through the carceral system in the Texas Youth Commission, now known as TJJD, and then the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for a total of about 20 years. So I'm super grateful that y'all are here and that we can have this discussion. So interesting documentary. I love how they used shoes as a catalyst to talk about women's experiences. It was an interesting way to do that. So what I found compelling was that there seemed to be some common threads through all these stories as they're talking. So maybe if each one of you can kind of share with us what you saw as some common themes in each one of these ladies' stories that maybe resonated with you.
Because I'll take your mic.
I know you will.
Good luck.
So one of the things that stuck out was so many of the ladies that spoke talked about trauma prior to their criminal lives. And I think that that's a really key point. I got incarcerated as a 30-year-old white woman from a lower middle class family. And I didn't really have an idea of the prison population, what that might be like, and what might have led them to that place. And I quickly learned that the ladies I was incarcerated with were broken long before they committed the crimes that landed them there.
And I sort of saw the same thing, is that these women were hurting long before they were incarcerated. And for me, it's been such a learning experience because as Marcy's mother, and I had a very successful career, but I hadn't seen this other part of our society. And for me, it's just been so eye-opening. And I mean, I've always been a very, very empathetic person and loving and kind, but it's just been such an eye-opener, and it's just opened my heart to so many different people.
What really resonated with me was that out of all the years that I've spent in and out of county jail, that's where I met some of the most beautiful people in the world. I mean, the most talented women, and also they've been through the most harm. And trauma has created this force that they've had to deal with. And when I watched the show, I mean the movie, I just remembered all the women that I was locked up with. And I remembered all the talent and all the beauty that was in there, but is now being sent away because of the way they reacted to a life that they were not even trained to survive in. So it just reminds me of the cycle that we're creating whenever we're just locking people up, treating them inhumanely, and then expecting them to come out and do what's right.
So, absolutely trauma. I echo what everyone said up here. Trauma, it's unaddressed trauma is a common thing that I saw. And a common thing that I did not see, right, is that nobody talked about programs or resources that they had prior to incarceration. They talked about the structural inequities and living in poverty. We heard that multiple times, but we never heard of communities where they were supported or where they had access to supports to meet their basic needs, to feed their children, to keep the electricity on in their house, to access childcare so that they could work 12-hour shifts 7 days a week just to pay the rent. We did not hear that, and that was common. Poverty, the structural inequities that people in marginalized communities live in. And then then you have the family policing system that comes in and says you're unfit because you can't feed your child. But the structural inequities that exist are what keep people from making livable wages. And then they're tasked with coming home with a felony conviction. So now you can't get certain jobs, a lot of jobs, and there's basically zero access to any type of housing. When you're talking about housing for families, when a woman comes home for incarceration, there are 2 places in the entire state of Texas, one which just started taking children this year. And both of these places, the child has to be under 12.
Yeah, thank y'all for those perspectives, right? Because I agree, like, what I heard was the common thread of trauma and survival, and to really, I think it's very simplistic and easy for maybe society and maybe legislators to just see this as a black and white issue of, these women just made a bad decision, but really looking at the things that what was happening, like Cynthia said, what was happening behind the scenes. Because trauma and violence against women knows no class status. It knows mental health issues, knows no racial barriers. Like, these were real problems that were not addressed beforehand. So Cynthia, you started talking a little bit about what, I wanted to ask next was, what exactly do you think that women need, perhaps you needed, to not enter the criminal justice system in the first place?
Yeah, Jennifer, that's a really good question. I think what women need, and I can speak for myself, there needs to be supports in the community. Women need to be able to access childcare. Women need to be able to have affordable childcare. There needs to be mental health care. There needs to be a safe place for women to be able to go and say, I'm experiencing food insecurity. My child has a behavioral problem. I don't want him to go to jail. I don't want to lose my temper and get him to go to jail. But we have something happening in our household, and it doesn't mean that we're dysfunctional. It means that we need supports. And I think that showing up for families and giving them access to childcare, mental health care, restorative justice practices that modify behavior, I think those are the things that would have helped me. I think those are the things that would help a lot of families from going into the carceral system, having access to substance abuse treatment programs and medicated assisted treatment without having the collateral consequence of losing my children, or without thinking that, they're gonna report this to the police and now the police are gonna be watching me and I'm gonna get pulled over when I'm trying to go to the grocery store to get laundry detergent. It shouldn't be this vicious cycle of punitive fixes, because they're not fixes. We can look at our incarceration rate. Texas incarcerates more people by sheer number than any other state. The women's rate of incarceration is up to the 900 and something percentile. If it continues on this rate, they will outpace men. So we have to come in and meet families where they're at and give them sustainable support. And it doesn't mean give these things to them forever, right? People want to thrive. People want their children to do good. I want to equip you with the tools that you need that are conducive to success. So if my community supports me, I will teach that to my children. And then we begin intergenerational healing.
Maggie, what do you think?
I think everything that Cynthia just said, I can second that. But what I was thinking while she was talking is what would have helped me. And I started going to jail at the age of 16. My school called the police and they arrested me on campus for trespassing. Now, I think at that time, I was crying out for help. I had been through some traumas, but I didn't know that what I was doing was survival skills, So, but once that first arrest was made, I felt like that was where I belonged, because that's what society was telling me, that my behaviors meant that I needed to be shut away from the community. And so I believe that if I would have had a support system there, and my mom and my dad didn't have the tools they needed because they weren't given the tools. So if we want community safety and we want people to stop cycling in and out of jails, I think it starts at youth. I think we need to make sure our youth are being cared for. And like I said earlier, a lot of the treatment that I got in and out of jail was inhumane. So I came out like a feral animal, and I believed that I was not a part of society. And it wasn't until somebody gave me a chance, somebody believed in me. And like Cynthia said, I had a cushion until I could get on my feet. I didn't want a handout. I just needed to survive until I could heal. And then I could thrive.
Well, everything that these ladies said was spot on, right? I wanted to just kind of touch a little bit on the lack of resources prior to committing a crime to survive. And just say that during my decade-long incarceration, I spoke to thousands of women. I met a plethora of different women from everywhere, right? And not one time did I hear someone say, man, I was so happy when I was out there doing that. Man, that was where I want to, that's what I want to do, and that's what I want to go back to. And it's just fascinating that that is the heart of an incarcerated woman, yet our recidivism rate is so high. That's a whole nother discussion, right?
Yeah, here's a question for your mom. As we're talking about this, what women need to not go into the system. But once a woman who she is incarcerated, a mom, how does that impact the family? How does that impact the family that she leaves behind and kids?
Well, Marcy actually has 5 kids, and 2 were babies when we call it when she went away. And then the 3 older ones, they're just a year apart, and they were like middle school age. And so they didn't live with me, but I was their support system. But we were all just grieving, and what it does to families I mean, I lost a career. I lost everything. I mean, you can see I'm still a mess. And fortunately, I have a very strong marriage. I have a very strong family. But it's what it does to the families. I mean, and it never even dawned on me. I mean, and I don't know if Marcy even knows this, but I knew she was messing up because I could tell, because that's my daughter. And she would always withdraw if she was doing something that she thought I would disapprove of. And I was not a mean mom, but I knew that there was something going on. And then her husband called and he said she pled guilty and she got 20 years. And within 2 weeks, I quit my job. It was horrible. I don't even know how to describe it. But what it does to families is just, it tears them apart. And knowing that my beautiful daughter, who I love so much, was being treated so horribly. And I would go to visit and I would try and be stoic and her daddy would try and be stoic or her grandmother. And she would try and be stoic and she'd just say, Mom, no. Because she knew we were gonna freaking lose it if we really thought about what was going on. And so it was just horrible, but she kept saying, Mom, they can't keep me forever. And so I can't even, her kids still have problems. The 3 older ones are grown, they still have problems. They all suffer from depression. One of them is off and on suicidal. Her 2 younger girls who are in middle school, their mom left them. And it's bad.
I wanted to, so I got myself together while she was talking. You asked that question, I know you asked my mom. So I have a younger brother, I'm 44 years old, we're not kids by any means, but he's my baby brother, 2 years younger than me. He sent me a text message a couple nights ago, and we were on streaming, right? We were doing our thing, so I wasn't able to respond right away. And an hour later, I called him and he didn't answer, and I texted and he said, no, I'm okay, Marcy, but I panic a little bit when I don't hear right back from you. And he said, I still have that in the back of my mind, that something's wrong, that you're not here. So.
Would y'all like to share too?
I kind of want to share from a different perspective. I am a mother and I've lost custody of my children because of my addiction and my incarceration. The state of Texas took my children, split them up. My oldest was adopted by my mother, and she had to come see me in and out of prison. And she can, I wanted her to be here today, but she had a date with a boy that she couldn't miss. So, but she'll tell me, Mom, I think I'm the only one in my school that knows what the inside of a prison looks like. And she can remember the smells. And sometimes she'll smell something and say, oh, it smells like Plain State. And, it's hard to know that my daughter has to experience these things. But she also had to be split from her mother, her sister, and her brother. And I just got custody back of my son who was back there asleep after 7 years. And a lot of the reason it took me so long was because of my criminal history. And it didn't matter what I was doing. It just mattered what I looked like on paper. And so when we're talking about families and communities, when I lost custody, my 3 children touched 3 different communities. And those 3 different communities are affected by my incarceration because my youngest doesn't even know where I am. So I don't know what kind of trauma she's been through and she might create for her community. And I'm dealing with the after effects with my son. And so it's a cycle. You know, I was incarcerated, but also now my entire family has been touched, and my entire family has a community that they will affect. And so, yes.
Yeah, so, my experience is I have three children, one is in the home with me. I have an 18-year-old son, I have a 14-year-old daughter. My incarceration, well, let's start at the beginning, the lack of resources in the community, the intersectionality with the policing and the family policing system, meaning DFPS, has created significant trust issues, not just with me, with my children. My children, because they also realized and were coherent enough to know that we were living in poverty and that a lot of the things that were taking place were a result of poverty. But then they also saw that they were stripped from their mother, that their mother went to prison, that they were placed in different homes. So they have a distrust. They have a distrust with systems. So that's one way that it affects children, and they grow up with that distrust. The prison environment is not conducive to a family setting. So you cannot nurture or educate your child in the little amount of time that you have or that environment that's there. So my daughter deals with a lot of self-esteem issues, a lot of self-value issues that are so deeply embedded in her that even after a lot of attempts and a lot of money spent to be able to regain the custody of her, the trauma is so significant that I must leave her where she's at so that there's no more trauma. And those are things done by systems. Those are things done as a result of not having supports in the community or having supports after you have removed these children from their parents and incarcerated their parents. There's the impact is lifelong, and for us adults, we spend a lot of time by ourselves, right? And we have a lot of time gaining our bearings and trying to unlearn behaviors and wrong ways of thinking. But these children, they grow up with the distrust. They grow up with the trauma. So it's a lot harder to undo. And it has collateral consequences of a lifetime. And not to mention punitively punishing the mother or the parent affects the child as well, because they now don't have access to housing. They now don't have access to a parent that can get a job with livable wages. So we ostracize the entire family, which of course creates intergenerational oppression, intergenerational poverty, intergenerational mass incarceration. So the effects of incarcerating one of us without considering the mother's status, is she a primary caretaker, without considering the mitigating circumstances. Is this a crime of survival? Did this actually make the community safer by incarcerating this woman? Or did we do what we've historically done because we've historically done it, and we actually made the community more unsafer by doing this instead of reallocating those same funds that we kept her locked up with to support her, to support the family, and provide something as simple as childcare so that she could work.
Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you everyone for sharing really vulnerable moments with people in this room that hopefully can take those moments and create powerful change right here in this building. Because, you know, when we tell our stories, as difficult as they are, suddenly the idea that you have about the stereotype of a person who's incarcerated, they suddenly become human, right? Like the women on the film in those uniforms, that was us. We wore those Crocs, we wore those striped uniforms, and suddenly it becomes more than just a number in a report. Suddenly we're humanizing our experiences, and incarceration tears families apart. It's not just the person that's being incarcerated, it's the kids, it's the parents. My family went through so much when I was incarcerated as a 15-year-old, and then cycling in and out of the system. And it's to end incarceration. It's really, I see it as a three-prong approach. You've got to really starve the system out, right? So it's those programs on the front end, it's programs on the back end of reentry, but it's also programming inside, meaningful programming. And I really like this, that art is a powerful way to engage people. And, you know, I know sometimes there's a debate among us about, you know, do we want to help the system be better, or do we want to demolish it completely? And I think that we can do both, because both are important. So my next question is, when you found yourself in the system, what was there a program that, you know, like these ladies found this art program? Was there something on the inside, programming wise, that got you through your time, or that you found impactful that maybe, you know, could be elevated? I'll start with you, Marcy.
Well, I have the microphone. but
Okay.
I'll tell you what. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I went into the system with a 20-year sentence, and they didn't want to help me because my sentence was too big. So there were a few programs available on the unit where I was at, but they wouldn't allow me to participate in those. And I'll say this because there's some ladies from Truth Be Told in here, and I think that's an excellent volunteer-run program. And I have friends that benefited greatly from that program. I wasn't ready to tell my story yet while I was incarcerated, so I was fearful of that program. But yeah, that's a no.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking from all of the time I spent inside of the cell. I can't name one program that made me feel like I wanted to do something different. If anything, wait, that's not true. There was Bridges to Life, but it was a volunteer-led program. They came in, and even though it did something for me, one of the volunteers that came in was not a very moral person, and, you know, made some of the girls very uncomfortable. So not everybody has, you know, the best intentions when they're going inside of these prisons. So sometimes we're doing more harm with the program, the volunteers we're allowing to go in. And also, I was in state jail at a Turning Point program as a drug treatment. And I had 20 years of addiction, and I really wanted to be there because I really wanted to stop using. I just did not know how. And that program was a joke. I mean, they got the funding for us, but they came in every morning, made us get up at 4:30, we had to put on our clothes, and we sang Baby Shark. You know, it was just a joke, like, it had nothing to do with me healing from the traumas that were causing me to use. And so it wasn't until I was released from prison and I was introduced to the women's home, which was a whole life program. It helped me spiritually, mentally, physically, educationally, and with a career. You know, it didn't just throw worksheets at me. So I don't think in prison I saw anything that helped me want to be a better person.
So I don't need to speak, I guess, to the validity of the programming, because these ladies have done an excellent job. But what I will highlight is there are some good programs, right? Truth Be Told's program. I coordinate the Texas Women's Justice Coalition, which is a group of women who are interested in women's justice issues. Some of the women, lots of the women, most of them are system impacted. Truth Be Told has been a consistent program that I have heard rave reviews about. Just like what Marcy said, she wasn't at a place where that was beneficial to her because it is a healing trauma program. And I think that that is beneficial. Strive is a program that's been newly implemented as a result of legislation that was implemented calling for new programming for women, right? And women are leaving with jobs lined up, have already been trained and interviewed for these positions before they leave. It's an excellent start, but they serve a very small number of women and very few cohorts a year. So if you serve 31 women every 6 months, we're not making a dent in the population. So it has to be expanded. Strive should be in every single unit. Every single woman should have the ability to go through a program and leave with job security, job placement before they leave. That is true rehabilitation. That is true reentry. And to speak to Darcy's point about her not being eligible for the program, the eligibility guidelines for programming are very, they disproportionately discriminate against our most vulnerable populations. Black and brown women, and particularly Black women, are overrepresented in the systems, but they are not in the programs. People with intellectual developmental disabilities are overrepresented in the system. They are not in the programs. This is a problem. We need to have clear, concise eligibility guidelines where everyone has access to these programs. We should not be discriminating against our our most vulnerable populations. Measure recently did a report, and what it showed for women who were returning home from prison is that there were some good programs, right? But Black women were offered the programs at significantly lower rates than white women. That Black women were less likely to even get into a program because they had been treated so horribly and inhumanely while they were in prison. And then there's the threat of the same people that are doing the programming have the ability to strip your freedom or your children away. So I can't go in there and be authentic. So there's a problem with the way that the programs are, they have good intention, right? But somewhere in the planning and the implementation of these, the waters have been muddied and our most vulnerable populations do not have access. We should be making sure that there are clear, concise guidelines and accessibility for every woman who's inside of TDCJ.
Yeah, and those are absolutely great points. So when you hear there's, all this programming in TDCJ, we always have to be cautious to say, okay, what is the population that's actually getting into those programs? Because from our experience, it does seem very cherry-picked to a certain demographic. Women that have bigger sentences often women with bigger sentences were often told, well, you're not getting out anytime soon, so you're not a priority. So, what did that leave them to watch The Young and the Restless? Really, that's it. I had a lot of time, and really the only programs that I ever qualified for was college. And I'm a big cheerleader about making sure that higher education in TDCJ is accessible and with a lot of equity, because it's just not on par to what the men are offered. It's pretty shocking, actually. But that was the only program that I ever qualified for through all my time. And groups like Truth Be Told, that's the kind of care that women need. We need trauma-informed therapeutic programming. And oftentimes programming looks just like what Maggie said. Here's a worksheet. Okay, everybody get up at 4 and clap and get to group and say a couple of chants. And another thing that affects programming, I think certainly Marcy will agree, is conditions of confinement. If you're trying to work on the, trauma-informed care stuff about your, sexual assault, and it's 120 degrees, I remember last summer I called someone to say, hey, have y'all heard that they're getting Pell for higher education? She said, girl, I don't care nothing about that. It is 110 degrees in this cell at Hobby, and I am barely able to talk to you on the phone right now. So that's a huge barrier to programming, right? Setting matters. Women aren't able to process the type of stuff that they need to in these programs if the conditions are so bad, or if they're offered completely on the back end when you make parole. I'm trying to figure out where I'm gonna live, where am I gonna have a job, and you want me to sit in this program for 6 months and be really focused, I could care less. I gotta figure out where I'm gonna live and how I'm gonna eat. So that is another problem with programming. So I'm gonna open it up, get off my knees, cause, oh, don't. Thought you were gonna make a joke. So I would like to open it up to the audience members right now. If you have any questions of our panelists, please don't be shy. You kind of look like you're going to. Okay, I'll come back.
So I do have a question. You mentioned that one of the three parts of the three-pronged approach. I don't know what's going on here. So long day for any incarceration is the reentry support, and we talked about the in-prison programs and how they're limited by conditions, whether environmental or structural. But I'm wondering for the four of you. What helped y'all after leaving in incarceration? Like, what was the thing, the support mechanism, whether it was a program or a group of people? What was that one thing that helped y'all?
I'll start. I know you're not surprised. For privilege is what helped me, honestly. I came home to a family that had homes and didn't have to steal to eat and didn't have addictions to substances or severe mental illnesses, and that's what.
Yes, thank you for acknowledging that. So the first few times that I was released back into the same situations and circumstances that cycled me right back into the system. This last time, Santa Maria in Houston, Texas, got me from prison, and they picked me up. And when I first got there, it was just my only focus was getting shoes that did not have holes in them and glasses that I could see out of. My glasses were broken and taped together with deodorant tape. If you've been locked up, you know what deodorant tape is. And I was walking around like that. And so once Santa Maria helped me just to get my physical needs met, then I moved over to the women's home in Houston, Texas. And the women's home gave me 14 months of intense therapy. They taught me how to dress. And a lot of us were women straight from the streets. We grew up in the streets. And so we had to learn how to live in society. We had to grow up in public. I had to learn how to manage money. And these are things that I didn't know that I didn't know. I knew how to live a certain way, and that was it. And so it wasn't until there was that whole life approach that showed me, there's a different life. That's what helped me. And it was a cushion, and it was a safety net. And once they let me go, it's been amazing ever since,
How many of those programs are there in Texas? Like that?
I think just one.
Yeah, there's not a lot. I know of that particular program, the Exodus House in Dallas, that's two. So I think there's two programs that have wraparound services that women can stay for more than 30 days at a time. So that's a problem, right? What helped me, unfortunately, I didn't have privilege or the Santa Maria house, so I went back to the same drug-infested toxicity that I left from. So the sheer will of tenacity in God is what brought me through. But I still keep in community and occupy spaces and make myself accessible to people that I occupied spaces with before I went to prison. And I take them to the grocery store. I take them to indigent healthcare. I help them apply for jobs. I show them how to do financial management, financial literacy. I help them do FAFSA so that they can get in college. I take them to sober living homes and I give them resources. So it didn't have to be the way that it was for me. That's a lack of resources in our community, right? A lack of funding from our state for our most vulnerable and ostracized population. Because I'm a single mom, but I do these things for people who call on me to do them. So it can be done. And the wraparound services, they help. Maggie didn't need to stay there forever. She needed a place to be where she was safe from harm, where she could do healing, where she could learn how to process, and at the same time, learn money management skills, apply for a job, get clothes that were conducive to what she would be looking for. And she's been phenomenal ever since. That's not an anomaly. That can be the common thread of what happens to women before and after incarceration. But we have to invest. We have to care about people more than we care about the profits that we make in the prison industrial complex.
Amen.
Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, well said. And I'm gonna have to Marcy's point, privilege. I mean, I had family that had jobs, support, and a foundation. And I think that is the part of, you know, all of our successes. And we found community somewhere, and that's the heart of it. That's the key, is to be able to have people who care, who will invest in you, and take the time to see you through that process.
No, you're fine. Thank you for coming and sharing your stories. I just had a question. I know that this was the common denominator. In the beginning of you guys' journey, you said that this was lack of resources. You didn't have anybody to guide you. So as a young woman who lives in a community where I see, young women, a little older than me or in high school going down that path, what is the advice or tips that I could tell them, or say, hey, like this is how you get on the right track, or what can I do in my community to be an agent for change, even if I can't get access to the resources that cities probably offer for them?
I would say, one, ask them what they need, because a lot of times people can tell you what they need. And it may be a resource that you can help facilitate. And then I would also, when I'm talking to young folks, I always tell them about what happens next, right? The stuff that the music videos don't glamorize, the stuff that social media doesn't talk about. It's fine, it's cool, it's trending, but then do you know that you can't get a place to live? Do you know that you can't get a job? Do you know that you're barred from certain programs for education wise? Do you know that you're gonna live with your mom forever until she doesn't want you to live there anymore? And then you're gonna have to couch surf, and you're gonna pay 3 times the amount of rent that other people pay just to have somewhere to live. I tell them the real life situations that come with the collateral consequences of a conviction. And I tell them about the inhumane treatment that they 100% will receive if they go to prison. And that's what social media and the rap songs don't glamorize. That's what they don't talk about.
And I think that there's no cookie cutter approach, right? But when I think about when I was suffering the most, what helped me was being humanized. When people would walk by me and look at me disgusted, made me more angry, and I did not care about my community. I was dangerous when nobody believed in me. When somebody started saying, hey, look, you're somebody, you can do something, that's when I started to care about my community. That's when I became responsible to somebody, because somebody believed in me. And so I had, and that never happened. And you don't know what somebody's been through, right? So in my childhood, I didn't have that. Some people were blessed with that. But once I had that, it was like a whole new world for me. And so when I think that humanizing people when they're suffering the most, and just letting them know, look, I understand that you're in a position that you don't really want to be in, but there is a better life and you are capable of getting out. How can I help you?
I totally agree with both of these beautiful ladies. My heart was kind of with what Maggie was saying. And the one thing that I noticed, going to prison as a mother, and older than a lot of the prison population, I got to be a prison mom, you know, and I had a lot of young ladies that came to me and they were hungry for a listening ear. They had never had a safe place to share their story. And I'd say that's a stepping stone. That would be where I would start.
Yeah, and they always take my answers. But yes, I mean, that is, like, it sounds so simple, y'all. Like, and this is something that when we go in the community, we just say over and over. We tell legislators, we tell TDCJ and TJJD and the counties, you know, if you wanna start somewhere, just treat people with basic human decency. And people are starved for love. They are starving, I think just through the whole world, but certainly the populations we're talking about, and it is just as simple, because it can feel really overwhelming, right? It is just as simple as saying, I'm here for you, you can trust me, and showing people that you can trust them, right? You know, not saying one thing and then delivering something else. So I think y'all were spot on. Does anybody else have questions or comments? Yes, no?
I just have a comment.
I think we can all hear you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I just think it's appalling that there are no psychologists, counselors, anything in the Texas prison system for women, or to have any kind of group therapy. I think that's kind of similar to what we do as facilitators. You know, we have a group of women that tell each other their stories and build trust. But I think it's just crazy that that doesn't happen.
There are programs and psychologists, but it's state funded. And there was a report done by the Texas Tribune about MTC and where this money is going. And I think that that's where we need to, you know, money is being used for people to go in there and help, but they're not coming in and helping. You know, they're coming in and asserting power and treating us like, well, if you loved your kids, you wouldn't be here. And I've heard that. You didn't miss your kids whenever you were out there doing this. You didn't love, you know. So the money that we're using is going to people who don't really care about us. And like I said earlier, just that right there makes me shut down and I don't want to talk to you, you know? And all of the people inside TDCJ, I don't trust them. And so how can I go to somebody that TDCJ has provided to help me when I have COs calling me the B word every time I move, telling me I'm nasty, I'm disgusting, you're a junkie. You know, these are the words that they speak to us. And then we're supposed to go, oh, hey, we got a program for you, you know?
Absolutely, everything that Maggie said. And I feel like, since our audience is legislative staff, right, or legislators, elected officials, tangible things, right? Getting evidence-based programming, having a bill that requires data, requires evidence-based data on the results of people programming, so that we're not continuing to fund stuff that does not work and is inequitable. Make them show you the numbers, make them work for their money instead of getting it off of the pain and the atrocious treatment of people who are incarcerated. There's a bill, House Bill 967, it's Allen's bill. Push it, help get it through, vote for it. It gets equitable programming inside of women's prisons, right? So that women have the access to the same things that men have access to, so that they have access to the same vocational training and the levels of certifications that men do, so that when they come home, they can come into the field and make competitive wages.
I'm here to be educated as much as I can. And thank you.
So I understand that a lot of people come in there saying they wanna help, they're volunteering, and a lot of you guys wanna receive that help. But with the majority of the other women that's in there that do not wanna participate in the program or say they want to, and when they get there, they don't open up. Is this a lack of communication between like maybe the facility and the volunteer groups, or what could possibly happen to where we're kind of like, hey, like, I understand that some of us is not willing to participate in this program, but some of us are, and so how, is it something missing in between, the facility and the volunteer groups, and why they're like looking at, or maybe treating y'all in that sort of way, or, does that make sense?
It does. So one is prison culture, to treat people in inhumane ways, to dehumanize women. And I don't think, I think that there is such a stigma around incarcerated women that maybe there's a perception that there's a larger percentage of the population who doesn't want programming, who doesn't want to participate, than what there actually is. People who don't want to participate, they're not walking to the education building. It's that simple. Everybody who goes to the education building and who signs up for these classes that only a very small volume of women get into, they want to be there. They're looking for something different. Nobody, I've never met anybody while I was incarcerated that thought, this isn't that bad. I think I'll hang out here for the next 5 years. People want to be equipped with the tools to live a better life, to be conducive to success. The volunteers, sometimes it gets convoluted with the prison culture of the dehumanization, but I think the most important thing is that there is no data, there's no oversight for the programs in TDCJ. They just say, okay, you need to have more programs for women and 5 vocational programs and, 10 educational classes, right? And so they go looking for these programs to check this box, but it's not meaningful programs and there's no oversight. There's nobody saying, okay, how many people graduated the class? What is the certificate? What certificate did they get? What did they learn in this class that could be applied to their real world challenges that they're going to face? What percentage of these women who took this class reciprocated? None of that's happening. What color? What age? Were people with IDD? What was the length of their sentence? Where are these people in this population?
I just kind of want to make a differential statement about volunteer programs are different than education and programming. State-funded programming are people who are paid to just sit there, and they treat us like crap because they are paid to, they see the way the guards treat us, and they come in to the education buildings and treat us the same. Volunteers come in because they want to be there. And so usually like when we go to volunteer programs, it's chapel classes or whatever, but those don't count towards good time or parole credits. Those are just, I'm choosing to better myself. So anybody who goes into the programs that are volunteer programs because they want to be there. Now education and these changes classes and classes that are mandatory for parole release are like that report put. Yes, we're putting money into these classes, but what are they doing? Nothing. They're giving us stickers and telling us to sit here and color, or I don't even know. We used to do coffee shots and do nothing in construction class, and I had a construction certificate when I left prison, but what can I do with it? Nothing. I literally got laughed at when I was like, I got my OSHA certification, so I can get that online. I was like, oh my God, I thought I was doing something inside, you know? So there's just that difference is people who volunteer to come in because they wanna be there. State-funded programming needs to be looked at.
Well, and that's what I've been thinking during this whole discussion about this topic, is that there needs some accountability about where the money's going, how it's getting spent. I mean, Marcy was going to drug programs. Marcy has never done drugs. And so there were just things that she had to do to get to come home. They were all drug related. And she told me, she said, Mom, they don't have any programs for people like me. And, you know, it's like, but they had the money. So she had to have something before she could come home. So this is what she did. So Marcy knows how not to take drugs. She already knew that. But, you know, it's just, there's no accountability for how the money's spent.
Definitely, I was parole mandated to go to a 6-month in-prison drug program before I came home. When I had my interview with my intake counselor at that program, and we went over my complete substance abuse history, she said, I've done more drugs in my life than you, what are you doing here? So I think that was just me feeling a bit right, so that they could get their money for that. I had another thought, and you threw me off, Mom. I was just, we were talking about programming. I lost it. Sorry, y'all.
Well, no, it's okay. I want to address what you brought up, which is resistance, right? Like, well, what do we do if there is quality programming and people just choose not to participate? And I kind of want to reframe that as, well, why? Why are they not wanting to, right? Because everything that we've experienced, even the hard cases of people who were in AdSeg and cell block, they seem like they don't want to participate. I don't give, I'm not doing that. Okay, let's trace it. Mandy's raising her hand. Let's trace that back. Well, why? Well, we already talked about, I don't trust you, right? Like, I don't trust you. And this is something that I've talked about with the youth system as we're doing the Finish the Five campaign to close those facilities. And TJJD's offering all this great trauma-informed care. I'm on board. I received that once I was out of prison. It was phenomenal. Changed my life. I'm standing here whole and much better, right? You can't do that in a system like TJJD or TDCJ because setting matters. Because you can't ask me to come participate in this deep therapeutic or cognitive intervention stuff, but you didn't feed me yesterday. You know that it's 120 degrees in here and I'm sitting in here and someone just got taken out because they had a heart attack because of the heat. So I think kind of just really when you hear maybe people bring that up, just kind of taking a step back and saying, well, you know, we've heard from system impacted women. They want to be well and they want to participate. Why is there such a resistance? And I can guarantee you at the heart of it is that I don't trust the person providing it. What time is it, Mandy?
It's 55, so just.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we got 5 minutes.
Yeah, just real quick, so something that wasn't brought up with the whole volunteer and the resistance thing, so there's actually criteria most of the time when you wanna do a program, like one of the programs, even with the chapel, is you have to be like a year major case free, and like 60 to 90 days minor case free. And so sometimes if a law knew that, an officer knew that you really wanted to be in a program, they actually would case you up, just so that you were ineligible. So it kind of sometimes had nothing to do with like you wanting to, so that might be that grounding, that thing, you're just like, what's going on between who wants to do it and who's actually showing up? It's because they would manipulate the system if they knew that you wanted to do it, or let's say that you spoke out loud, or let's say you're going to college. If you're going to college, sometimes they hit you with a major case, if you did something you didn't like, you're getting kicked out of college. So every little case that they had that had power over your life every day, they could manipulate what you were able to do or not do. It wasn't so much that they didn't want to do it. It was the fact that they could no longer do it because they weren't eligible by the chapel's rules or by the school's rules.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy, and this brings up another discussion that we all would love to have with you about how women's incarceration looks different than men. In terms of we are disciplined harsher, we are sentenced different, the standards that we're held to are far different than men. And there were some studies done to show that women incarcerated receive petty disciplinary with major outcomes. We would have a contraband case for having an extra hair tie, get a major case, lose our visitation, lose phone access. Our male counterpart gets a contraband case for making a tattoo gun or a shank, and he gets 10 days rec restriction. Like, there are real disparities in our experience, and that's what we have hopefully led to fight in really exposing how different our experience as women, and the women in this room, even those of y'all that have not been incarcerated, you know that your experience as a woman is very different. And it's really hard to articulate that.
And you could get a case for washing your clothes when they only give you 2 sets of clothes a week. So if you don't want to be stinky because you've been in 90-degree, 100-degree cell, and you wash your clothes, I'm saying this because I used to get cases for that, and you hang your wet clothes over, they will give you a case for that. I've never met a man who's gotten a case for that.
Right.
Never, but I was always getting in trouble because I wanted clean clothes.
Yeah, and so it really does go to that different experience. So we're almost out of time. I do want to say thank you everyone for coming, and I hope that we can meet your offices and work together on impactful legislation to create change, positive outcomes for our ladies and our girls who are incarcerated. And I do want to close with this because the theme was shoes. And everybody always, even my boss at work, is like, June, you're always in bright white tennis shoes. And I'm like, because girl, that was a thing when I was in prison. Because everything we wore was white. And there's that whole status thing again with women. But it was a thing to always have white, clean tennis shoes. So even out here, it means something to me to be able to have white, clean tennis shoes. So that kind of represents my personality. I would love if each one of you tell us, if you were a shoe, what shoe would you be?
That's hard. I want to choose one shoe. Okay. I am this is going to be really difficult. I think I'm a UGG boot, right? It's versatile. It can get me through many situations. It's trendy, stylish, but it can get me through rugged times if necessary.
I'm not a shoe person. I'm not a fashion person. If you know me, I'm always, anyway. But if I had to think of a shoe that would represent me, it would be something like.
The babies woke up.
My baby, my Nike Blazers. Because I couldn't do anything.
Or his shoes.
Yeah.
They actually are his Blazers that I took from him. So.
Well, I like boots a lot, but probably my shoe that I most identify with and that I love is like Nike Air, because if I have my tennis shoes on, you can't really sit and be lazy if you've got your tennis shoes on. And if I feel like I am being really super lazy, I just put my shoes on so that I can move.
Why did you take my shoe? Well, mine would be, but I would add pink. So I like the pink swoosh, and my Nike Air Max, they have the little pink on the bottom.
I thought you were going to say a stiletto. Like a blinged out stiletto.
You don't know me at all.
I think I do. Anyway, thank you all so much. We're just really pleased and excited that you spent the afternoon with us. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We appreciate y'all so much. It means so much that you were here.
Just click it down.
Yes, no. Yes. Yes, no, yes. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and this will be up, so if you didn't get to see the whole thing, make sure and come back. Love you all. Talk to y'all soon. And let me see if I can get out of it looking cute still, right?